What's up, y'all? This is Who's Culture episode Trace number 3. This is Gal and Nolan Hack. Hope y'all are having a wonderful day.
Am I allowed to talk now?
Our producer Tim was being all very upfront about when we exactly should go on. So okay.
Hello.
Yes. We do have a very, very entertaining show for you. We are discussing a number of things, including the wonderful world of South Park, and I say that sarcastically. We are going to continue to discuss the Marin Theatre play in Mill Valley, California, Thomas and Sally. We also have an amazing guest, Tananarive Due. She is a screenwriter and an author, also the winner of the American Book Award. She's going to join us around 3 o'clock on the West Coast to discuss the lack of color and, as the PC term goes, diversity on our screens. But, Gal, you watched, I think you've seen all the South Parks so far.
2.5.
2.5.
I can't.
Did you not get through the last? Yeah.
I could never. I tried all weekend.
Yes.
Could do it.
No way I was watching it, so I was wondering if you were doing it.
But we could start with the first one.
Oh, the first one.
The first one of this season. We're talking about season 21. We're not.
Oh, that one?
The one I know you watched.
That's the one I watched, yeah. Well, okay. So I was confused. The white supremacists were upset at corporations and fancy gadgets for taking their jobs.
Right. So they have South Park has a long history of this kind of making fun of people who complain that immigrants are taking their jobs. It's been long going for over a decade now. And so in the first episode of this season, they started out with the same individuals who then come out with tiki torches and Confederate flags, and they march because they're against Google and Amazon Echo. It's Amazon Alexa and Google Echo, right? Are taking their jobs. And so basically, I mean, it starts off pretty strong in that sense, if that's what you're looking at, that jobs are being done more by computers and technology, and that the working class in America are mad at the wrong people when it comes to taking your jobs. I'll give them credit with what they started out with, but then they kept going.
Yeah, they didn't get off the point, and well, okay, as a black person, it was confusing and kind of, well, it was pointless to me, the episode, because it was billed to be South Park calling out white supremacy for what it is, which they failed miserably to do that. There was I was kind of looking at it like this, like, okay, they're mad about Alexa and Amazon, Google, and I'm like, when did neo-Nazis work as encyclopedias and people's personal assistants? And then the racist mob goes to a store that sells Alexas, and one of the kids' dads comes up and pulls out pepper spray, but then so does one of the leaders of the racist mobs. Message to Trey Stone and Matt Parker, creators of South Park: neo-Nazis don't use pepper spray; they're armed with assault rifles.
Oh, you're not wrong there. I noticed. Okay, so I had read an interview before the first episode, which is the only reason I even started watching it this season, because I haven't watched it in probably 9 seasons, if not longer. But it was stating that they weren't going to talk about Trump, that they were going to go back to the old South Park, stuff like that. Like, okay, whatever. Are you still there?
I'm still here.
Sorry, my Skype crashed, so I made sure I was still on the call.
Keep talking.
But they had spoken
I'm a good
length about.
listener, gal. I'm a good listener. That's a good co-host.
So they had spoken for a long time, multiple interviews on how they were going to try to avoid dealing with, Trump throughout any of the new episodes. The last season, from what I read about, was just like overly Clinton and Trump and overkill. And I don't know because I didn't watch it. And so, like I said, they promised to get back to the original type of, South Park. But then, that's where it starts off with Amazon Alexa, whatever, the freaking technology and the voice commands and things like that, taking the job. So, okay, I understand that. And so then you get this kind of, they're doing a reality show. Randy Marsh, who is one of the main character's fathers, is doing a reality show with his wife called, what is it, White People Renovating Houses?
Yeah. That and I was okay with that.
It makes, look at how many shows that are literally that.
Yeah, so that was cool.
And that was the name of the actual episode, which is what caught my eye, because I went, okay. And nothing really, I think that it just, the pinpoint and the thing that stood out to me was the tiki torches. They made sure to have tiki torches with these working class, of course, is what they were, the poorer citizens of South Park. And then it just kind of stopped. It then turns into, they start talking about white supremacy very vaguely, but they don't take it on head first like they used to in the past. And instead of like going on and actually tackling the issue, it just kind of fades out into now we're all friends. Let's just all get over it.
They made you, they kind of gave sympathy to the main white supremacists, which was ridiculous, but normal, which is why we do this show every Wednesday, Who's Closer. And this show is for white boys.
It always has been, yes.
Always has been, and it is. I mean, it's for white boys.
There are some episodes in the past, and when I say in the past, I mean like before the movie, which I guess was mid-2000s. Hell, I don't even know.
A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Right. And before they really got big and, made a lot of money. And I think that you can see a distinct change in that, in the way, in their writing after that. And some episodes, I remember the Token episode, the main Token episode when it was first introduced, is one that I was able to use in a classroom for a long time to show the satire used when it came to the whole fact that most people, especially my students, don't know when I say what a token is and how you have a person of color as a token in a show. They're usually not a main character. They're usually just there. It's pretty much my black friend, right? That's what they're there for. Mm-hmm. And they did that very well for the first few seasons, and focusing on kind of the ridiculousness of it and the fact that it was a very real thing in Hollywood. And then whatever happened, I don't know. I remember there was one whole season where it was like a role-playing game, but, it's South Park. What do you expect? It's for teenage white kids. Yeah. And they're going to go with the times.
And I've watched this show before with white boys. And I saw them laugh their bigoted little hearts out. Yes. Stuff like, Mexican girls get pregnant every 5 minutes. It's not like white Catholics, have get pregnant a lot or throughout history. That's not a thing. And this particular episode, probably the last South Park I ever watched, because this is the first one I've watched since the Washington football team when they did, which was decent, I will admit. But something I also noticed, I wasn't in the racist variety, it was of the sexist variety. I saw some sexist bullshit with Cartman, who is basically Donald Trump's turkey neck clone, which is troubling because Cartman is a child. They have the same ugly neck. I don't know if anybody else noticed that, but anyways, Cartman's saying in the episode, he's talking to his friends, and he's saying that his girlfriend, who he gets upset with because he says she's too needy, and starts saying that she's mentally abusive to him, which is dangerous because that the shit that men do to women in relationships does so much damage, and that includes mental abuse.
Don't watch the second episode.
And the third one you watched.
Well, no, the second episode going on that, though, because, okay, first of all, you have to realize, and I will give him this, that Cartman has always been the asshole character. You're supposed to, like, whatever, he's like the Trump, right? Anything he says, the opposite is true. And he's always been that character, always. And then in the second episode, it's kind of takes on that whole mental abuse thing, and what turns to find out that he uses the example that she had said she'd kill herself if he didn't come back to her, and ultimately they have video recording that he was the one that said he'd kill himself, and so the whole point that they're making that kind of a joke, and then they go into the whole episode is about. There's a North Korea subplot, which was actually pretty good, and Twitter. But the other subplot, which I completely forgot about till I watched it again, because I was more looking at the North Korea subplot on Twitter, and Trump on Twitter, and they did not stay away from Trump, in other words.
Right.
But this one, it was that they were doing like an awareness week at the school, and they were doing distracted driving awareness, and since Cartman got brought up with suicide, he wanted it to be suicide awareness, and so the whole episode is just him saying he's going to kill himself if they don't pay attention to him, which was just bullshit. Mm-hmm. The whole idea that people just tell people they're going to kill themselves because they want attention instead of actually looking at the problem of mental health. And so
that's what it seems like this show does.
That is what it does.
Yeah, they pretend to show these real problems in Western society and Western culture, and dare I say white culture, and then they just gloss over it when they
do continue to do that. Too. And they always have, and that's at least if you were to talk to somebody, I've seen interviews where they explain that it's the satirical purposes so people can realize this, that, or whatever about themselves. But then in the third episode, they pretty much make a statement of America is too stupid for satire and will never get it. And now, I had to actually read how this ended because I could not finish it. And Nolan, you know this because I kept talking to you each time I tried. Mm-hmm. And I was just typing away. Oh, my fuck. And I think I got 8 minutes out of the 20. I mean, it's a 20-minute show and I couldn't finish it in a week. But it is a take on natives. And so the show starts off with the kids being in a panic because they've taken Columbus Day away. And now they have to go to school. And so I kind of went into that going, okay, because I remember the old South Park, like, okay, maybe they're going to actually talk about why they're taking Columbus Day away, or, let's discuss it. But no. Yes, they do talk about it, but what they do is they end up, it's ultimately a show saying that, because it then immediately goes into taking statues down and how the liberals, as they of course say, are the white liberals specifically. They don't necessarily say that, but are only doing this to hide their own sins of the past. I'm not going to say that I necessarily disagree with that, but they completely ignore the whole point of the situation at hand. In other words, they're making it out to be that everybody is lying about these statues now to get them taken down. That's how this came out. But here's where it got worse, because it did. Because we can have a general discussion on the groups of people that are now ultimately for taking down the statues that never gave a damn before. We can have a discussion on that. It needs to be discussed. But then the main character, again, is Randy Marsh. The same character from White Men or White People Renovating Houses. And ultimately, it has this long history of being a Christopher Columbus, pretty much fanboy. And there's like pictures of him on the internet. Even at his wedding, he dressed up as Christopher Columbus, and now he's the one spearheading this campaign to get rid of Columbus Day. They show him go to like the New York. There's a statue of Columbus in New York City. They show him go there and like I think he shits on it, to be completely honest with you, but some kind of obscene thing. He calls people up who live in Columbus, Ohio, and calls them all racist. So he's the one who is like spearheading this campaign in South Park world to get rid of Confederate statues and Christopher Columbus. And then once they find all these pictures of him online, he goes to do an ancestry test, and this is where they lost me, because here's the ancestry. They have this like fake commercial for a fake ancestry commercial, like 23andMe or anything like that. And in the commercial, it is I found out I was 5%, and then it's victim. So anything that's not white European is called victim in this show. So I found out I was 15% victim. Now I can apply for this kind of benefits. I found out I was 25% victim. And that's exactly what it's, and that's where they lost me. Because it was like, so if you're not white European, you're victim automatically here. And so it was like, apparently anybody who's not, white European is quote unquote playing the victim, which is your typical alt-right bullshit that you can see on any social media or Breitbart or Fox or anything like that, right? And that's where they kind of lost me there. And then of course there's some obscene, they have a native character come in and there's obscene sexual acts trying to, I don't know, they lost me. I quit, and
What is it with them, with Hollywood? I mean, they've been doing it to black people since the jump, but with Native people, my word,
and it was
the sexualization of Native people in Hollywood it's obscene, it's an extreme. It's so extreme.
It generally is. And I read an article, because I had to go look up an article when you had said that we want to talk about the third episode, and I'm like, wow, shit, I didn't finish it, but let me go see how it finishes. Maybe they somehow save it. I knew they weren't going to. There was no way to after that. And I saw this perfect quote, and it's from Vulture, and I can post it. This is a constant refrain going back to that kind of whole. It says, here, the good news is that this plot cues Randy Marsh up to aggressively make out with an acne-scarred Native American fellow who I hate that word, summarily, I hate that word, falls for Randy and serenades him for the sparest arrangement and blah, blah, blah. The bad news is that this reframes the conversation to be about the dishonesty that the writers presume lies behind the wave of the statue removals in the country. Instead of relitigating the ethics of removing Columbus statues, they'd rather inspect the liberal mindset that they believe has motivated the recent push for removal. The back half of the episode keeps layering bad faith assumptions on top of one another like a delicious lasagna of bullshit. This is exactly what it says. Chief among them being that those crowing the loudest about their morals are only trying to prove something. Randy Marsh willing to do anything to keep himself in a position low enough that he can still punch once to be offended just because it makes him look good. And then the next sentence is what I was going to try to get for. This is a constant refrain of alt-right types that those in pursuit of social justice secretly love the world full of bigotry and hate because it grants them the moral high ground, and it paints the assumption that nobody actually has any genuine decency. That was pretty much what you get out of it too.
Yeah, I'm looking at. I'm also posting the article you just talked about, and I'm looking at some of these pictures.
From this episode?
Yeah,
you found it? Okay.
It's disgusting. And there's no other way to describe this, because people in the populace, the main group in this country, white America, they always go, "Oh, you're being too sensitive. You're being too sensitive." When in actuality, you're the ones being horrible.
No, you're right. That's the whole point of privilege, right? Yeah. I mean, it comes down to everybody else is so sensitive. Why do they have to be quote unquote PC? And when they use the word PC, they mean treat people with respect, right? So suddenly that's wrong to those that feel that way because they've never had to listen. And this is what I always have to explain to my white students. You've never had to hear these voices before in your life that you're hearing now, whether it's on Twitter or Facebook, but people are talking and other people are listening. These are the voices that have been silenced for generations, for hundreds of years, that are now getting a voice somewhere, whether it's YouTube, but somewhere, and you're finally hearing it. And so that's where you're getting this kind of this backlash of this, oh, everybody's so sensitive, it's just a statue. And then that same person will turn around and say something completely hypocritical in a sense, right? Like, oh, you must stand for the flag, but you're too sensitive for these statues. So who's really being the sensitive one here, right? Mm-hmm. Who's really being the snowflake here? And that's really what it all comes down to. They've never had anybody really stand up to what they consider the norms, which is being able to dehumanize any group that isn't them. It's the same thing that we see that men do regularly with women. When women start to stand up, when women start to get any kind of power, wouldn't even be the term there, but voice. They have to, that's where Gamergate comes in at. They just have to slam it down in any way, shape, or form.
From my, obviously, as the person of color on the program, it's just exhausting because, one, you have to sit through, if you're watching television or a movie or a play, what have you have to sit through this and just go, geez, one, is traumatic, and then two, it's annoying. And then you have to explain why it is because, white people are looking at you sideways, and then they start whining. If anybody should be complaining, it's us. It's us, and it's exhausting.
Yeah, the constant explanation. You're absolutely right. And being a white woman, I have no problem doing that. That's my job. And I don't mean that as in that's my job because I'm a teacher. I mean that's my job. I will completely. It's what white folk work. That's what we call it in Ferguson, right? Like, it's my job to discuss this with other white people and go, look, here is what this discussion is about. And I understand that not everybody has the awareness, let alone the ability to do that. But I do have a way with words, and that I just do. It's why I've been a successful teacher. And I can teach some pretty sensitive things, but it shouldn't be as exhausting as it is, and then the wrong people are usually the ones who are attacked and when asked or being forced to explain things, and it's just ridiculous. There needs to be, I do see more and more people standing up, at least right now. Maybe it's just St. Louis because of everything going on here, but even online. But you're right, it's like this form that somehow people of color must explain everything to them. And it's ridiculous to see.
Yeah, we have to. There's that phrase that we're white people's mule. We're their mule. We have to explain everything on top of being hurt in the moment. And then we have to explain why we're hurt while they're hurting us with the insensitivity and just at times like this South Park crudeness. It's exhausting. I mean, I'll just stick with that adjective. And it's hard. It's increasingly hard for me to watch anything because, one, I always look at, okay, well, how many people of color are in this? Do they, if they're going to make a comment about transgender folks, are they going to have any people who are transgender on the show? If they're going to have someone who is disabled, are they going to? Are they actually disabled in real life? Because so often when a disabled person is cast, it's someone who is able-bodied. Mm-hmm. When there are plenty of very talented disabled actors and actresses. So I should say actor because I was told by a woman who's an actor once, we don't like to be called actresses. And I get it because you're putting another category and it's like, wait, I'm an actor too. I just happen to be a woman, But And that right there, and we're going to get into that in a minute with our wonderful guest, but the lack of, well, I should say the oversaturation of white male in entertainment is absolutely ridiculous. And that's why one of the many reasons when people go, well, but it's 2017, how could this be? Well, it's America, so, I don't know what to tell you. When you look at the writers for TV, it's less than 40% are women. In terms of film, I think it's under 20%. And one of the things we're going to discuss in a minute with Tananarive Due, who is an amazing author and screenwriter, is the Ralph Bunche study at UCLA puts out every year, diversity study, showing how ridiculous and how much of a disparity there is between people of color and white actors, white directors, white writers, male actors, male writers, male directors. And this is why we keep having this problem, because white men keep writing everything and keep starring in everything. To me, that's the main issue.
I completely agree with that.
It's a simple thing. Let's just look at this for what it is. Have more writers of color. Have more writers who are women. It's that simple.
Oh, right. I mean, I remember when Orange is the New Black came out, and I watched the first season, and I was like, "This is really good. They write this well." But then I find out that they're what they're kind of going to do in the second season, and I've not seen anything past the first season because it was supposedly going into more of the race relations aspect, but being all written by white women, and it's like. I don't necessarily... The whole having writers on board is not that hard to do. There are plenty of writers. I mean, even if you look at this year's box office success of Get Out, which is the first time it broke... the first time an African-American producer was able to break 100 million, I think, was one of the records. There were multiple records. And... the fact that it was 2017 before something, I say that simple, but $100 million is a lot of money. But there have been amazing black producers, black writers.
Yeah.
And it took a satire, which, by the way, is a fan. I would love to talk about that film sometime. I love that film. It's a hell of a film. It is, and that we could, discuss that one as well. Done very well. Better than I probably expected.
Why isn't we need more of people like Jordan Peele, and I think we also need more of that satire to shake white people. They go, you see what you've been doing? You see what you're doing? But at the same time, we do need Ava DuVernay's to produce Wrinkle in Time. We do need much more of that.
Yes.
It's so dominated by white men.
And then when I think about TV, what we have is Shonda Rhimes, and I can't think of anybody else off the top of my head. Like, it's that limited. But it should be. The
good thing, at least for that Thursday night, I think the lineup's still the same. You have Viola Davis, Oscar winner. I think she's also an Emmy winner. You also have Kerry Washington. And then you have Grey's Anatomy, which is co-created by Shonda Rhimes. So at least Thursday nights on ABC, we got something.
True. Are we going to bring in our guest?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
And are you
there?
Hello.
Hello. Welcome to Who's Culture, and thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here.
I'll give you a little intro, and if I botch your pronunciation of your first name,
you won't be the first. You won't be the first at all.
Well, to make you feel better, it took me until I was 12 to pronounce one of my two middle names correctly. So,
okay.
Just blame it on me. Tananarive Due is here with us.
Yes.
Well, I got it. There you go. And you can follow her on Twitter, TananariveDue on Twitter. She is the winner of the British Fantasy Award as well as the American Book Award, and is a wonderful screenwriter and author, and we are pleased to have you on the show.
I'm excited to be on the show. Thanks for asking me.
Indeed, our pleasure. Well, the first thing we wanted to bring up, and this is my question, where are we in Hollywood as far as a fair and equal reality in terms of the entertainment world?
Oh, well, we're a long way from a fair and equal reality. I mean, I didn't know we were going to be trying to be fair and equal. That's a whole, but I will say this, as someone who's been publishing since 1995 and working with various people trying to do film adaptations of my work, I'm going to start with this. We've come a long way. It's slow, but just to give you a quick example, there are dramas on television with black lead actors, and that doesn't sound like it should be a big deal. How to Get Away with Murder, Scandal, all those types of shows, Shots Fired with Sanaa Lathan, which was fantastic. But it was not that long ago. It was rare and non-existent even to have a black lead on a dramatic series on a network. That's not even ancient history. Let me think. It's probably not even 10 years. I don't want to say for sure, but it's not that long ago. So while I share the frustration, and I do, I'm also sometimes just thinking, wow, things are changing. And it's a good feeling, like Get Out is a movie I talk about a lot. I'm teaching a black horror class at UCLA. And
I am so jealous. Sorry.
Hey.
Hello, I'm the other host. I'm Gal.
Hey, and I'm just going to tell you, it just happened. It just dropped this year, but it is going to have a ripple effect. Black Panther is going to have a ripple effect. Mm-hmm. When we have this conversation in a year, we'll still be a long way from equality. Don't get me wrong. And we can talk about that and what's standing in the way. But I just want to acknowledge for a moment, I'm not that old, and I feel like I am seeing changes and social agitation is making a difference. If you don't mind me just going on and on, Color of Change, for example, did work to get cops off the air. Because for all these households across the country, the only time they saw black and brown people, since we weren't leading the dramatic series, and we were maybe the sidekick, or one of the ensemble, was this black and brown parade on cops. And this is feeding this notion of black criminality. They don't break down and discuss why black and brown neighborhoods are policed differently and laws are applied differently. They don't explain all that context. So that was a racist show as far as I was concerned. And Color of Change helped get that off the air, just like they helped get more black cast members on Saturday Night Live. There are a lot of people working behind the scenes to make changes. And then, Oscar So White, Reign of April on Twitter, blew that up wide open and had a huge impact with that. So, yeah, there is a long way to go. And we will talk about that. But I'm just so excited when I look at the work people are doing to break those barriers down. Let's break them down.
Amen. I remember growing up in the 90s, and Fresh Prince was it for me. Mm-hmm. That was everything, because we had a wealthy, rich, honestly, black family, and you had all different representations of what a black person can be, and it could be anything. We could be anything. We are not a monolith at all, even though obviously there have been stereotypes forever. And Hillary, Ashley, Will, the judge, the professor, and it was beautiful. And even on that show, it showed the realities of black life in America, even showing racism in Los Angeles, California. And I grew up in white neighborhoods, wealthy neighborhoods, so that really hit home with me. Seeing Will and Carlson being arrested just for driving a nice car because of the color of their skin.
Yeah, that resonated for you because that was real.
Oh yeah, that was dead real. And I'll ask this: what's the next step? You just mentioned all these great things that we have done to push forward. What is the next step as we sit here on Wednesday, October 4th, 2017?
Well, I think the main thing is we can't rely on anyone to push for us. I think we already know this. And it's not that we don't have allies. There are allies. I've met allies who have gone that extra step to try to bring projects to the screen and whatnot. But at a certain point, we really have to advocate for ourselves. There's a huge difference, as you know, because I saw your tweet earlier today, that, we are disproportionately represented in the money part. We are feeding the machine because we love our movies, we love our TV series, we are disproportionately represented in the ratings, all that. And people know this. So sometimes you get so-called diversity for reasons that are just about money. We need some black faces on the screen. But black faces on the screen are just the first step. We also need some inclusivity in the writer's room, people who are writing for those black faces. Because I can think of an example of a show that really disappointed me, Sleepy Hollow, which the first season, I mean, honestly, by the finale of season 1, I was like, oh my God, there's a black horror show on TV. Because it started Nicole Beharie as a strong co-lead, but she really kind of felt like the lead. And Orlando Jones was on there, and he had a family. I mean, it was like, and it was horror. It was scaring me, and that's my thing, is horror. So I was really excited, but there were some changes, and then they come back season 2, and the magic was gone. There was less diversity, I think, in the writers' room, much less diversity in the cast. They had Orlando Jones in Prison Orange at the beginning of season 2. I was like, oh, here we go. Because now we're back to the familiar, And I don't want to pick on the show. It had so much that I really enjoyed, but I think without knowing all the ins and outs of it, I think had it had a more diverse writers' room, that show, or maybe if the network had been willing to commit more to a black horror show, sort of realizing what it had, you know what I mean, rather than fighting what it had. Whatever it was, something went wrong. And eventually it got canceled. And just an example I like to use, and I tweeted this, is it involved time travel. So at one point, Nicole Beharie's character was having an encounter with the hologram of Thomas Jefferson. He was actually interacting with her as if he were Thomas Jefferson. And this is a sister, okay? Meeting Thomas Jefferson and actually able to communicate to him. And I think a black writer would have understood that is a complex conversation. That is a complex conversation. What about Sally? Even if we don't want to get into Sally Hemings,
we will.
Even if we didn't want to later. Yes. In that episode, she could have said something. I mean, come on. This is like one of the architects, one of the founding fathers, but a slaveholder. And I'm sorry, I'm a polite person. I'm not a confrontational person with strangers. But if I met Thomas Jefferson's hologram, I would have questions. And I just don't think the writers thought of it because they weren't coming from that experience and coming from that knowledge of history. So to answer your question, we have to advocate hard. Like in the model of Ava DuVernay, as soon as you kick the door open yourself, you bring everybody you can in with you. And I think there is a lot of that spirit in Black Hollywood. And I see more activism growing in Asian American Hollywood, where people are realizing, hey, we have power. We deserve representation. And I think we need to help each other with that, So we push and we push and we study, we learn, we bring up our game, too, because you don't want to get the chance and blow it, because then you and the next 5 people after you won't get that chance, So yeah, there's a lot to do, but it has to begin with us. That's just the bottom line. There will be friends, there will be advocates, there will be some people who are motivated by the money. But in terms of the content and the purity of the content and like you said, those images that children are going to grow up with, mm-hmm. They really matter. They make a difference. So it's up to us.
Well, and that, I'm so glad you said that. I mean, my whole activism work is built on that model of it has to be us. We have to be the ones to free ourselves, like we've done in different facets, I guess, in our continued quest for freedom, because we are still not free.
Right.
But in terms of that disparity, I mean, you're looking at it's less than 20% of television writers are people of color.
Yeah.
You're going to have, Gal and I were talking about this before you came on, we're going to keep having these problems of racist shows, insensitive shows, because all we have are white male writers.
20% is even that even sounds like a lot to me. I mean, in some ways, not when you compare it to the amount of money we bring, but I wonder if those numbers are skewed somehow to favor a higher percentage, like including people who I don't know. But I've seen a lot of writers' rooms, and there are very few writers' rooms, to your point, that even look like they have that percentage of representation.
Well, it's funny you said that, because Gal was talking about Orange is the New Black, and like Gal, I love that show. A lot of people love that show. But when I found that out, that it was nothing but white writers, I was like off, because especially when you have such a cast of color, and you have words like the N-word on the show, I mean, I'm just not comfortable with having the writer's room completely white, and you're trying to speak on our issues, because it's a whole problem right there.
And here's what ultimately also happens, no matter how well-meaning that writer's room may be, and considering, in fact, what the writer's room looked like, it's pretty amazing that the show had as much of a feel of authenticity as it did, okay? So on one level, they're like, all right, you fooled us, But what happens, similar to the example I brought up before, is the lack of understanding of the history and the emotions. So the way Samira Wiley's character was killed off, spoiler if anyone missed it, she was the main reason I watched the show. And I was watching long after a lot of people had concerns similar to yours and had sort of turned away, or just based on the premise alone, no thank you, I'm not going to watch a bunch of sisters in prison, or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I hung on. But when they killed her off and the way they did, with the choking death and this very visceral experience, and then also pushing the narrative of the well-meaning guard who, oh my gosh, I didn't know. I'm sorry. That was, to me, a violation. It's a violation, and that, to me, is the lack of diversity in the writer's room showing. Because there aren't enough people in that room, and even one person sometimes isn't enough, not for a show like that. Shoot. You need maybe a cadre of people to stand up and say, look, this is how this is going to come off. It's going to be triggering in terms of, they're trying to push that police violence narrative. They're trying to have their cake and eat it too. So we show you the imagery that all of us have to fight through on social media all the time. But then we don't even get the satisfaction of them making the guard villainous. He's just a nice guy who made a mistake. He didn't know. Oh, what? Am I choking you? What? Am I crushing you to death? Or was that when he crushed her? I don't know what it was. But it was like this sort of accidental scenario that just happened to mirror all of this explosive imagery that is from real headlines, which gives me no sense of closure, no sense of healing, which I think sometimes the show paints itself as more than it actually is. And it's problematic. It's problematic not to have that representation. You can't tell me you can't find black writers when Ava DuVernay can find black writers. What? You're not looking in the right places. You're not giving the right people opportunities.
Well, I tweeted before the show, which I think you referenced, the people going to see the movies, the people of color accounted for the majority of ticket sales for 5 of the top 10 films in 2015. So obviously there's a lot of people of color in the country, and yet we're not allowed to write, direct, produce most of the time, or even star. Still underrepresented in that capacity.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Underrepresentation, it's been a long road on these shores for all of us who are of color, in particular African Americans and the descendants of those who were enslaved. And a lot of Hollywood was born on painting a mythology of what the country was instead of the reality of what the country was. So to this day, there are a lot of folks walking around who don't realize there were people of color in the Old West. They don't realize that if you did a street shot of a scene in New York in 1935 or 1940, there would be black people on the streets. Mm-hmm. It's this whitewashed version of history that then becomes reality, because that's what there are people in this country who, I swear to you, that's what they really think. We were not here. And therefore that feeds the narrative that we don't belong here. And Hollywood was born, the literal birth of Hollywood. The first blockbuster film in 1915 was D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation, which was specifically designed to create empathy for the Southern cause and to make blacks villainous, especially black men. They were literally the monsters in the film, chasing after white women. One jumped off a cliff rather than be touched by the black man who was chasing her to her death. But the Ku Klux Klan comes to the rescue. And basically the movie itself is advocating mob justice. And the Ku Klux Klan is the hero of the film. So wearing your white robe, in fact, he invented D.W. Griffith's movie was what led to the first actual cross burning in the United States. It was after the film. They were like, oh, that looks good. So it actually influenced the rebirth of the Ku Klux Klan. And it's not just that one. There's Gone with the Wind. So, one might be an accident, but there was actually a concerted effort on the part of Hollywood. Not through maybe intentional malice, or certainly not conscious malice. So few people have conscious malice. But there was enough collective malice that it created this whitewashed version of the past that makes it very difficult to break through now, even though the numbers are very, very different from what we see represented on the screen.
And Woodrow Wilson, the president at the time, actually screened.
Yeah, he screened
in the White House.
In the White House and lauded it. And hey, if you've seen it, I've had to see it. I'm using it in my course. It is extraordinary filmmaking. I have to give it props on that level. Unfortunately, there are still film professors who I hear teach it just for the film techniques without the context, explaining, oh, by the way, you're going to see some messed up stuff. Nothing.
It's like Lenny Riefenstahl's Triumph of the Will. That was great movie making, but you can't just start the sentence and say, that was just an amazing movie that she made, and that's the end of the sentence. You have to continue saying, it was trying to show how great the Nazis were and how awful these other races are. No, that's what the movie's about.
Yeah, and literally that is what it's about, and that's what The Birth of a Nation was about, except exchange the Ku Klux Klan for Nazis. It's a propaganda film, Southern apologia, and I think the reason, as a country, people cling to that mythology so hard is because to believe in the evil of that slaveholding past that built so many of the riches of this country, as we saw on Blackish last night, sometimes I wonder, how is this show on the air? But yeah, people can't look at both things and say, okay, the country's wealth was founded upon this horrible institution, this violent institution, and then still feel love for their country. They can't figure out how to understand the history and both feel love for their country. And that's just something people have to work out. I mean, people of faith work that out with scripture, so work it out. I mean, find your faith where you need to find it. Yeah, there's a contradiction here. How do you then get around that contradiction in your mind? But as a nation, the nation has not been able to get around that contradiction. So it's on the one hand, slavery wasn't so bad, and the South wasn't so bad, and at the same time, bracing for payback.
Well, you have that dilemma, and the problem is most people, when they see any entity, country, government, do those things and realize that those things have been done and even still done to this day, you're thinking, well, geez, I don't know if I can let alone love this country. And you have a country that was made on the backs of black slaves, $100 trillion free labor. And then you have these robbery and pillaging and murder and rape of another race of people. And that being whitewashed is going to dilute everybody's mind. And Yoshi just created a question in my head. When shows like Seinfeld and a movie like Gone with the Wind, when you see either the lack of color or the complete racial stereotyping of people of color,
yes,
what are your thoughts? Like when you're watching that on the screen, and it's and I'll admit, Seinfeld is genius. He's, in terms of his comedic brilliance, he's great. And the show's great. But what do you think? And same with Gone with the Wind. It was a well-made movie. It was racist. Sorry. But what are your thoughts when you see that on screen?
Well, if it's an older piece of work, and actually there's some films you go back to after 15 or 20 years, and you're like, wow, this was really problematic. and you hadn't really noticed the first time so much. I think that was Predator 2 I was looking at going, that is a really racist depiction of L.A., and it was like a war zone, and you saw that a lot in those movies in the 90s. But if it's an older film, okay, I guess it was marked by its time or whatever. I can choose not to watch it. I can flush it from my life or whatever. But it's the new stuff that honestly that gets me. It's the newer stuff with the, like you're saying, we're not in the film. If there's an ensemble film, over a certain number of cast members, if I don't see POC, I'm like thinking, this film is erasing my experience. This film is erasing people of color. The bigger the cast, the bigger the issue, as far as I can see. And then there are those films where you wish they would leave you out. Like as soon as the black character shows up, you're like, oh my goodness, what are they going to do to this poor... When I saw Alfred Woodard show up in the movie Annabelle, it's a horror movie, so I hate to keep using horror examples, but that's kind of my thing right now. She showed up, and it was a sort of a very typical thing that you see with, and no disrespect to her, she's a great actress.
Mm-hmm.
And no one is ever aware they're doing this, but it's a pattern. She showed up, and she was offering help to the white couple as their sort of spiritual guide, which is a very common trope for black characters in horror movies. And then, spoiler, she killed herself to save them. But for no reason, though, okay? It's not like she raised that girl or she'd known their families for years. She had just met them at the beginning of the movie. And for some reason, she was willing to sacrifice herself to save them. It makes no sense. That's because that is a trope called the sacrificial Negro.
Yes.
And filmmakers have loved that. They love our nobility and our loyalty. I guess because that means we're not planning an uprising. I don't know. But that, again, that loyal Negro showed up in Birth of a Nation. That is a trope that has been forever. I mean, they love that. And by they, I mean collective filmmakers. It just pops up again and again and again. So when I see it, they fixed it in Annabelle 2. I have to admit I saw the sequel because horror heads will give you another chance. But they fixed it. They didn't do anything. I mean, they heard about it. I'm quite sure they heard about it. And let me get to that. I have respect for people who are willing to listen and grow. I do. You know, everybody makes mistakes. Mm-hmm. I've made mistakes with representation in my work of other groups. You know, that's a human trait. We're not familiar. We have these impulses. You want to include the character, but they're not that important. So, yeah, they're going to die. You know, they're going to die soon or they're going to die first. That's what happened with black characters. So, yeah, if someone points it out to you and you say, my bad, and you fix it, I have a lot of respect for that. What I can't stand is, I guess, out of defensiveness very often. You know, these showrunners on TV and filmmakers will try to defend their decisions and not be willing to see it. And that's frustrating. That's frustrating. That makes me not want to support or actively boycott your product. You know, I don't do that often. I'm boycotting the NFL right now because of Colin Kaepernick. I'm not really boycotting any TV, but it's the kind of thing that makes you want to boycott.
Yeah. I remember watching the movie. It was Amy Schumer. I can't even remember what it was called. LeBron James, whatever. It was a movie.
I know what you mean.
Yeah. And the movie is very popular. Bill Hader, who was hilarious, was playing the love interest. And one reason I was really interested to see the movie, after seeing The United States of Tara with Toni Collette, I developed a little crush on Brie Larson, who was in the movie with Miss Schumer. Okay. But then 30 minutes into the movie, after, this is funny, it's good, I'm enjoying it, blah, you know. It just hits me. This is New York City, and the only person of color so far in this movie is an effeminate, stereotypical effeminate Asian man. I'm like, off. I turned it right off.
Yeah. And that is common to create images that feel non-threatening and comforting to white viewers because they're centering the experience of white viewers. And unconsciously, that is what a lot of white creators will do. They will center the experiences of white viewers. And then, like I said, if they're called on it and they say, oops, my bad, and they learn and they grow, I can support that. You know, I'm not trying to put anyone out of a job unless, of course, there will be jobs lost as some more POC are hired in this room. And that's inevitable, you know. But at this point, we're not even at the point where we can compete for the jobs. And this is because Hollywood, you know, they say it's all who you know in Hollywood, and that's very, very true. So if you have these very insular circles, like I remember my husband, Stephen Barnes, and I, we collaborate frequently. We were pitching a horror script with Animals Gone Wild, and the guy was very candid with us. He said, listen, I really like your take better, but I've worked with this guy before. Now, I don't take that as racism, but I mean, I know without asking that it's a white guy, okay? Mm-hmm. But that's not the point. The reason you would say you've worked with this guy before is because he turned in his scripts on time, he met his deadlines, he didn't make fusses, we got the job done. You know, that's the kind of efficiency level that people are thinking about. When you hire someone new, that's a wild card. You don't know. So on one level, that's very human. It's very human. You would, I like yours to take better, but we're going to go with this guy I know. But when you extrapolate that out over the whole industry, it means that it's very difficult for outsiders to break in. It's very difficult to break in.
Right.
There's some internships and some Disney, ABC has a program. There are great programs out there, and anyone who's interested in the industry, do your research. Get on Google, see, because those programs make all the difference. It gets you in the room with the people who are hiring, and those are very difficult rooms to get into, say from the outside, like someone like me who was writing books first and only began taking Hollywood meetings because people were trying to adapt those books. I wasn't coming through traditional like film school and all that circles. I didn't start as an assistant somewhere and then move into screenwriting. I was just an author who couldn't figure out why it was so hard to get these movies made. and I will say unequivocally, see, I shouldn't have even started that word, that that race has been a factor holding back adaptations of my work specifically. I've had people tell me to my face, do the characters have to be black? It's not even a secret. It's not, that's more than once even. So it was never a secret that it's considered a liability to have a black lead. I heard a story once that, I can't remember the name of this movie, Man on Fire, I think it was called, with Denzel Washington. He's the only black person in the whole cast, because Denzel would do those stories that were intended for white audiences, and he was basically the black person in the cast. Sometimes he would have a family, which I always appreciated, but sometimes not really. And in this, he was the only black cast member to speak of, but I heard that the studio slated it as a black film because he was the lead. You see what I'm saying? That's how conscious and aware they are of that color shock. That even though there are no other black folks in this movie,
right,
and it's clearly intended for a, quote, mainstream audience, it just so happens Denzel had that level of celebrity where he could get past that color shock. They're going to call that a black film. So if you actually had a black film, give me a break. What chance do you have? A film with a primarily black cast trying to tell a black story. Those kinds of films, those were tough. And it's getting better, though. I think we're undergoing a renaissance right now in Hollywood that reminds me a lot of that burp we had back in the 90s when a lot of great films got made and they had all black casts and didn't even have to be about race. It was just like mysteries and dramas and romantic comedies, just on and on and on. But then it stopped. It stopped for a while and it got really tough, and now it's starting to come back. And I think this time it'll have more staying power. Because there are a host of reasons. It's never been easier to make a movie in terms of the cost because of technology and crowdfunding, number one. There are a bunch of reasons. Diversity initiatives, people in leadership roles, like there's a black woman who's the president of ABC. So you start to see impact in the programming. I think a lot is changing, and it doesn't seem rapid, but it's fairly rapid compared to, say, that dry period after the 90s when I was trying to get stuff made. And it was like, what? There was no Get Out for me to say, oh, my book would be like Get Out, except this. There was no Get Out as a frame of reference. So they would just stare at you with a blank face. They have no idea what a black horror movie would look like, or how they would, or more importantly, how they would sell it. How they would sell it. Because that's all they want is, how will I sell this? And now more and more people are realizing that they can profit from black stories and stories about people of color, LGBT stories. That always helps when people can see where they can make the money. But also in the age of social media, agitation for social change has accelerated, I think. In some ways it feels like we're going backwards. That's a different conversation. Because people whose agenda goes against our agenda also have access to that social media, right? So there's this sort of battleground in social media for the soul of the country, not to overstate it, but that's literally what we're undergoing right now. But art is one of those places where you can look at your social media, like my Twitter, and see nothing but horror stories, horrible. Oh, gosh, why do I even get out of bed? But again and again and again, I see tweets from the arts that uplift and inspire me. Oh, shoot, Lupita's going to be in what? And it's that I'm keeping my eye on. People are getting traction. Almost every black actor I grew up watching is working right now. A lot of people are working. A lot of new people are working. I think it's an exciting time, but we can't rest. We can't think, oh, thank goodness we saw that. Let's move on. There's a lot to do. As soon as you push the door open, if you take your eye off it, someone will be trying to push it back shut. So it takes sustained effort and agitation. But this is a battle we can win. We can actually show the country what it really looks like and tell stories that other people have been deprived of. That's all good. Everybody wins.
Well, that gives me hope.
Well, I hope so. I think it's, you have to have hope. This, like Angela Davis said at a conference I attended recently, or back in April, rather, if she didn't, I'm just paraphrasing, because, she's a fierce fighter and warrior for the cause. But when you meet her, she's full of light and just the sweetest, gentle nature you would ever encounter. And I asked her in a gathering, how do you keep that light, that energy? And it was about optimism, that she kind of admitted she's an optimist, because if you're not, how do we do this work? How do we sustain our energy for this work without believing that even if we don't live to see it, that it's actually making a difference?
Angela is it's almost like every time I hear her speak, she says something profound like that, and I didn't even actually physically hear her speak. I just heard someone paraphrasing what she said. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you were talking about horror yourself, and you both are big horror fans, the two of you.
Yes, I'm also a professor, and I spend a lot of time on race in the media. Unfortunately, I don't get to teach a nice class like that. I'm really jealous of you right now. I'm sitting here in awe, like, oh my God, all the things that I could get out in 16 weeks would be amazing.
10 weeks, honey, 10.
Oh, you get 10, still 10 more than I get. So I'm just sitting here in awe. But I wanted to know, because since you're also a horror fan, have you seen it yet? The new one?
I have seen it. I have.
And I want to know, okay, I'm going to first of all say that I thought it was done rather well, but I had a pretty big problem with the way Mike was presented, and I wanted to bring that up at some point on the show, and there's no better time than right now, because we're talking about horror. No, I wanted to get your viewpoint on the cutting of one of the main characters, the only person of color, the whole history that is given in the book of, the black spot, and the history of of it feeding off of that fear that comes from the hate of race in America. I mean, in the book, Stephen King has a pretty good focus on that for a little while. It's not the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And then when this movie, which again, I want to say it was done really well, in my opinion, but it wasn't a half hour in and I'm thinking, where's Mike? Mm-hmm. And then you get, Ben, who gets his history background, which is Mike. And so I'm like, now they've given him somebody else's. And I just had a problem with, it just kind of ruined the whole thing afterwards when you get out and start thinking about it.
You know what? It had been so long since I had read the book. And then I didn't, and all right, I have to make a confession here. I'm a big Stephen King head, but the clown Pennywise, even in the book version, for some reason did not scare me. So as years went on, I saw the miniseries when it came out, and I think some people have mentioned they spent a lot more time on Mike in the miniseries, if I'm not mistaken. My son just watched it. But again, I didn't watch it with him because I was still a skeptic. I didn't believe that Pennywise was going to scare me, so I wasn't that invested. If I had watched the miniseries again right before seeing the film, I would have probably been like you, like, what happened? So instead, I'm like someone who has just vague memories of the story. Was just glad they let the brothers stay in the story. Yeah,
absolutely. There's
no doubt. Right? Let's start with that, because that doesn't always happen, And then you could, if you paid real close attention, you could see that those were black people at the black spot that had been burned down. They had a picture of the black spot.
Yep.
But it really took until the second viewing for me to point it out. No, see, look, honey, look, and it was gone. So I can see where if you have a fresh memory of all that history and that was just a blip, and you'd be like, what? So what they did show was the homeschooled kid. They don't say why he's homeschooled. We're left to assume it's because he's different. He's black, and there are no other blacks in this town, pretty much. And he was very savagely beaten. I thought on a visual level, it looked obvious because he was black, although they didn't use the N-word, which I actually appreciate. I don't necessarily need to hear that word in a film like that anyway. But I can see where, yes, if you have a fresh memory of all that fuller story, it would be very disappointing. I do think the filmmakers could have done more with that relationship between racism rather, and evil and violence, because that's so timely. I think they were trying to play it a little bit safe, kind of have
I think the same thing. I said the exact same thing, that during, with everything going on right now, that I feel that they were trying to play it safe.
Just in case there are people in the audience who think it's okay. No, whatever. I don't know what they're trying to do. I guess it's just trying not to stir it up. People are so afraid, But unfortunately, when you move away from the thing itself, which is they targeted Mike because he was black. Let's even say that out loud. When you move away from the thing itself, it does shut off these corridors where you might have explored something that would add richness to the character, richness to the film, resonance, it was super popular. It might have made it super important, but they kind of shied back from that. And I did notice, because I did see it twice, so I'm telling on myself. I really liked it. And Pennywise actually scared me this time.
Oh, I really liked it as well. Like, this is really for me to come out of a movie and only have one major complaint, that is a very positive thing.
Yeah, Pennywise had me. Pennywise had me in the extended trailer. I was like, oh, wait, I think I will go see it. And Pennywise delivered. I think I let out a scream at one point. So as a horror head, you know how hard it is to find a movie that will actually make you scream. And so on one level, it was a huge success as a horror film. But what you're talking about with the representation, or even more importantly, the lack of depth in that experience, that's unfortunate. I do think they could have done more with that. And the more I think about it, on second viewing, I noticed at one point the boys were passing a church that seemed to be full of black people singing. I don't know where the black people came from, because I never saw them anywhere else. But if you listen very carefully as these boys are passing the church, you hear what sounds like a black choir. Now, I thought that was in the movie to kind of establish the separateness of the black and white worlds, because, church is the most segregated building every Sunday kind of thing. So that would be a big mystery. But on second viewing, I think it was almost more to establish a sense of dread as the boys were on their way for some kind of a showdown, which is using that sound of the voices to establish a kind of otherness that on a subterranean level will begin to creep some people out. Maybe. I'm just guessing. But it just seems like an odd choice. Why, when there are no black people visible except Mike and his dad, literally, and maybe one little girl, will we pass a church which sounds like it's full of black folks singing when we've never seen those black folks? And in filmmaking, you have to ask every shot, why is this here? What does this mean? Nobody writes anything in a script just for nothing. That's a lot of expense to shoot that scene, or to find that location. So why is it there? And I can't say I have the answer, but I noticed it. And
I'm sorry.
No, I'm done.
In the story, and that it was my favorite movie growing up, probably for the wrong reasons, as I was a 13-year-old girl the first time I saw it, and Jonathan Brandis was in it, but still. So, it was one of those, but the miniseries itself was one that I had seen hundreds of times. It's one that I've shown my nephews and the kids I raise. It's like the first horror movie they ever get to see. I don't know if that's the best thing to do, but it's what happens.
Horror.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I remember my nephew was like, I think 11 at the time, and he's like, I want to watch a horror movie, and I'm like, oh, we're watching it. It's a mini series. I always do it that way, right? It's a mini series. It was on primetime TV. It can't be that bad.
Right.
But
a lot of people were scared by Pennywise back then.
Absolutely. And Tim Curry did an amazing job, just as Skarsgård did this time. I mean, two very completely different characters playing the same character. But in the actual story, Mike's family is the only black family in the town ever since the burn down of the black state and that or black spot and that was just things that me that they kind of just cut him. I think he's in there like 3 minutes.
Before we let you go, and we've gone over time because you've been a wonderful sister.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. Yeah.
Tananarive, I want to get your thoughts on this play, Thomas and Sally.
I've seen you tweeting about it.
Have you? Have I been tweeting about it? I didn't notice.
Just a little bit. Yeah, I think you noticed. I don't. All I know about the play was from the little bit of research I did looking at your tweets and your retweets of other people who find it offensive. So, where is this playhouse? Where is this being mounted?
Playhouse is the Marin Theatre Company in Mill Valley, California, right outside of San Francisco in the Bay Area.
So I have a little bit of squeamishness about talking about other artists' work that I haven't seen. You know, that's just natural because I know it's hard to get a play mounted. So first I want to give him props that he got this mounted and staged and whatnot. But I can speak to the promotional material, which showed an attractive, 23-year-old looking Sally Hemings with Thomas Jefferson in the background. As someone pointed out, almost like it's a romantic comedy kind of approach to the poster, which would give the impression that the play was about more of a romance than a child rape, to your point, which I think is an accurate point, and is the same question I would have had Nicole Beharie asking of Thomas Jefferson's hologram, what about Sally Hemings? And it's very frustrating, of course, to see that story distorted because there cannot be a romance between a slave and a master, and there certainly cannot be a romance between a child slave and a master. And to frame it that way is a real disservice to history. I mean, just period. I mean, you can, tell yourself whatever you want about how kind and gentle Jefferson might have been. Maybe he brought her flowers or whatever. But a slave, someone who's a slave person is not in a position to choose a love match with the master. There are repercussions when you don't do what the master wants to your family, to you. You don't know what might happen if you say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing. And even if she thought she was in love, would she have thought she was in love if she hadn't been enslaved? I mean, come on. And that's a lot of assuming to make. She didn't leave a diary.
No, she did not.
So why are we...
Well, she may... The diary, we think it's hers. If it's not hers, it's one of her family members. We actually discussed that on the last show.
Okay.
Somebody needs to figure out if that's actually hers. But to your point, yeah, if you don't do what the slave master says, you're getting in trouble. In fact, Jefferson had child slaves, just like Sally, black boys working on his plantation.
Yeah.
And when they, in his mind, misbehaved, they would get whipped or sold into the deeper South, where you couldn't even go through even more hell. So I can't disagree with you there. But I want to thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. And that story is disappointing. It's disappointing to see that spin in this day and age. It's part of that same apologia, that same mythologizing of history that we need to put a stop to. It's leading to a lot of problems in perception and reality. But I'm going to go. We're over time. Thank you guys so much for having me on the show.
Thank you for coming on.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
That was the lovely and talented Tananarive Due. You can follow her on Twitter, TANARIVE Narive Due, winner of the American Book Award and the British Fantasy Award. Tremendously talented person, and so glad we have her on.
Horror all day.
Yeah,
and the trope, and the trope that the black man always dies first. There's a reason it's a trope.
Well, I'll give Scary Movie what they call it, the Scary Movie franchise.
Yeah. Scary Movie.
Credit, they made fun of that. That was
right. I know. And then Cabin in the Woods did a pretty good job with it as well, which was just a satirical horror film, but they spent a good amount of time on that.
And to the play, because it's still going on, and it's heartbreaking and disgusting, as Tananarive just discussed. But I want to say this because some people don't know exactly what's in it, and they want to give it the benefit of the doubt. Well, we got someone to see it.
Oh,
we got somebody to see it, and this is what's in the play. In the play, Sally Hemings, who is a child, was a child slave of Thomas Jefferson's. In the play, Sally Hemings appears frivolous and in love with Jefferson, extremely sexually open and adventurous. Every time I see that, I want to throw up.
A child,
and a child slave. So you got to
right.
Double lack of humanity there. The only physical violence in the play is black on black violence.
Of course.
Which is odd because rape is violent, child rape is violent, and it's about a man who raped a child for years and years and years and into adulthood and forced her to have 6 children. The play, quoting here again, tried to obscure the fact that Sally Hemings could not consent. Shocking. Again quoting, about 10% of the packed house were people of color. Audience responses were from white members who enthusiastically praised the show. Praised the show. What does that remind me of? Ooh, the subject matter we just talked about, Seinfeld, A Birth of a Nation, Gone with the Wind, Disney's Pocahontas. White people love to profit off black pain. And this time, they have a trump card that they're trying to use that, black guy wrote it, so it's okay.
And then by them seeing it and then discussing it, they feel as though they are now experts on diversity.
It's like the black friend thing. No, I have a black friend. I'm down with y'all.
Yeah, exactly.
Give me a break. There's a quote that I was going to use for this show, or the promotion of it, or something. I just never figured out what to do with it. But it's a quote from Jennifer Lawrence in X-Men Apocalypse. Just because there's not a war doesn't mean there's peace.
How appropriate, Jennifer Lawrence, who played an Asian.
Yeah, and also she was told, I can't remember what movie it was, but she was filming a movie, and she was told that the ground she was standing on, I think it was some rocks or something, I can't remember exactly what it was sacred to Native people. And she goes, "Oh, really?" And she wipes her crotch and butt on the sacred place. So.
That's what I'm thinking of. It was Emma Stone that played the Asian, but right. That's what I'm thinking of, what you just talked about.
This reminds
something.
This reminds me of this list I have that I add to. I don't know if you've seen it, Cal, but it's all the famous white people who I used to like and who I used to think were cool. I'll just read like a little bit of it. Like, let's see, David Bowie. He child rape. He had sex with 15, 16-year-olds. So did Mick Jagger.
Also despised his history of telling people that he was bisexual, and when he got older decided that that was just a phase and it was disgusting.
I did not know that.
I just learned that, as a matter of fact, because it is LGBT History Month, and I work with a student group, and we were putting stuff together, and somebody was like, we need to honor David Bowie, and I was like, yeah, and I started looking up and doing research, and I'm like, no. So yeah, that's something I just learned in the last month.
Jeez, that's one thing I loved about him.
I know, right?
That's embarrassing. I mean, I don't fully understand it because I'm straight and cis, but I get society the way it is, Western culture, being gay, you're told that you're not doing something that's natural, you're wrong, you're disgusting, all that nonsense. I get that, but geez, that's awful. Wow.
Go on with your list.
Yeah.
Who else can I ruin?
Who else? Well, I mean, they're already ruined.
Ruined, right? Yeah.
Ruin them further. Okay, let's see here. John Glenn, because I am a big space nut. And the reason for that is he signed the Clinton crime bill. So I didn't know that until recently. Matthew McConaughey, who ironically, I loved his Lincoln commercials. I was one of the 5 people who loved his Lincoln commercials.
Right.
Along with his mother. And I found out, a native person, a friend of mine, told me that he supports the Washington football team's name and mascot.
Yeah.
So I was like, bye, Matt. Bye, Maddie. See you later. Also on the list, the entire cast of Will and Grace. I used to love this show, and one reason why I fell out of love with it was because, one, the ending was horrible. The show, it was such a great show, and it was just lazy writing. But then I ran into a woman named Megan Mullally, who played Karen Walker and did a hell of a job doing so. Loved her work and other things, including Parks and Rec, for example. So you remember Cecil the Lion, Gal? Remember the?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. White people love that lion. They loved it so much. I grew to hate him because, of course, we're people of color getting killed every day in the street, bleeding out. No, I don't care about that, but a darn lion, So I kept seeing white celebrities just crying white tears for this lion. It's driving me crazy. Damn lion, And I quoted a tweet of Megan's and said, they care more about lions than human beings. At least our lives. So guess what happens? He DMs me, Megan.
Ooh. And
she goes, oh, I had no idea what I was doing. Of course, where have I heard that before? I'm so sorry. I wasn't thinking, I was even nervous, even bring up the thing about Cecil. Yes, you're right. It's still racism. And she pulls the, can I use you as my mule? Can you educate me? And because for one, I did like her work so much. I used to have a crush on her. Sure, okay. You know what? Okay. So I go a little back and forth, talking about how the police killings of people of color have gone up, how Native people actually kill by the cops more than any other race in America in terms of the rates. And then, she goes, oh, I had no idea what I was doing. Of course, where have I heard that before? I'm so sorry. I wasn't thinking, I was even nervous, even bring up the thing about Cecil. I was like, And I even gave her some information. And then she comes back with, "Oh, wow. I had no idea. From now on, I'm going to be more diligent with speaking out on these issues." Because I didn't believe her for 5 minutes. And she of course, has not done so since then. I don't think Gal, have you seen an Entertainment Weekly article?
No. And now would you expect something like that, considering her rise back into will and grace?
Oh my, yeah. I'll read up a couple more.
That's what I'm like. Give me some more of this list.
Okay. Let me. I'm going to send it to you in the show chat that we have between Gal, myself, and Tim, our wonderful producer. Rooney Mara. I loved her, but of course she pretended to be a native person in the new Peter Pan.
Of course.
Yeah. There is some of our listeners may not know him, but he's pretty freaking famous. Ted Danson. Yeah, Ted Danson. This man has been all over television over the last 20 years. And even
over the last 30 years.
30 years. He's on even on Curb Your Enthusiasm nowadays. Now, I did not know that this man also went into a kind of a racial tirade and used the N-word. It was a monologue by Ted Danson. And at the time, he was dating Whoopi Goldberg.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. He appeared in blackface. Used the word nigger more than a dozen times during a series. I'm reading this from RogerEbert.com. God rest his soul. Said it more than a dozen times during a series of jokes that drew smaller and smaller laughs. They're still laughing. I just want to point out. There was still laughter. Nervous laughter, but still laughter. The audience was finally groaning, and Danson faltered as he tried to plow through his written material. At one point, he even ate a watermelon.
I just found the article. It's from 1993. Yeah, it's pretty young, I guess.
Yeah, I was 6 years old.
I don't know anything of this. This is new. God damn it, Ted Danson.
I'm telling you. One thing I've learned about celebrities. Most celebrities are a-holes. Fame corrupts, power corrupts. It is what it is. Now, most white celebrities, oh shit. You're in trouble. And I happen to be a major Jeff Goldblum fan. If you want to roast me for this, I don't blame you. I'm not forgiving him for this, but I'm trying to move on from it. The commercial he did with Lil Wayne, where George Washington's in it, and everyone's just happy. You have a murdering slave owner in your apartment. No one's going to say anything. This is all fine. Apartments.com was the commercial during the Super Bowl 50 a couple years ago. So if anything else happens to Jeff, where he's like a swastika flag hanging in his basement, I'm going to lose my mind, because if you take Jeff away from me, I'm going to have a mental breakdown, because the list is so long and it continues.
Yeah, I see your list now, and I'm not going to ask about John Oliver, because I'm going to kick you. I don't want you to ruin him. Please. That's all I got left.
I'll give you, considering I still want to keep...
Really? I like this trade game we got going on here.
Yes, I want to keep JG. I want to keep Jeff Goldblum, so you can keep John Oliver. Yeah. But okay, since you're enjoying the list, and I've heard others enjoy it as well.
I'm excited to see Matt Damon on that list, because that's top of my list is too.
Yeah, that one's easy if you know Hollywood at all. He pretended to be with the white savior and the I don't know what the movie is. I don't know what it's called. I don't care. About the Great Wall of China. There was that time him and Ben Affleck had that show about giving
Project Greenlight.
There you go.
That's where it comes from me. Yeah.
Yeah, that was disgusting. Shutting down black women is an American tradition that's Mr. Damon added to.
Yeah, your apologies don't mean shit when they're forced.
Exactly. Leonardo DiCaprio.
I'm all for people apologizing when they actually realize they've done something, but when they're forced, no, fuck that.
Exactly. It was completely forced. And you could... and
wait, it was one of those best apologies, right? I'm sorry if you were offended.
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
It says, I'm going to read it here, because it overall, it was about, there was a discussion about promoting diversity in the industry, and he had somehow, I guess, struck her down, the woman who had brought it up to him. So then there was a lot of controversy because this was like a reality. I didn't watch this show, but it was like a reality TV show, I think, on HBO or Showtime or something like that. And in his actual apology is, I believe deeply that there need to be more diverse filmmakers making movies. I love making movies. It's what I have chosen to do with my life. I'm going to skip to the actual part. My comments were part of a much broader conversation about diversity in Hollywood and the fundamental nature of Project Greenlight, which did not make the show. Oh yeah, you must have cut out that, huh? I am sorry that they offended some people, but at the very least, I'm very happy that it started a conversation. Yeah, fuck off, Matt Damon. Sorry, Top.
Well, that's what the list is for. It's to, I guess, ruin some people's fandoms. But it just shows you how most white celebrities are just a-holes. I mean, it goes to the point, it's a study, it's a scientific study, scientific fact, at least 2/3 of white America is racist. So, obviously, people in white America are also actors and famous people. One of them being Leonardo DiCaprio. I asked around after the Reverend got so much love, and of course ended up winning an Oscar. He finally got his Oscar. Finally. But the movie was very anti-Native. It used Native women as sexual props. And most movies do that. Most TV shows do that. And he added to that. And I like the guy. I had no problem with him. But as there's a little discussion in the show chat.
Don't fuck with Keanu is what I'm saying.
Gal says don't ruin Keanu. And
take John Oliver. Don't fuck with Keanu.
Take John Oliver. Don't F with Keanu. And then Tim says, he's actually talking about my favorite comedian, Paul Mooney, who's black, so wouldn't pertain to the list. But the list, I mean, okay, it's a long list. I'm not going to read all of it. But another one is Tina Fey.
Yeah.
I adored her. I had a crush on her. The little glasses,
White moderate right there. You're white liberal.
Oh,
right?
yes.
That's exactly. Yeah. And Amy Poehler.
Yes. She's on the list too. They're both. They're actually back to back because what you just said, they're always linked together. Their defense of their racist material, especially if you're talking about Tina Fey's show, The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. And Jane Karowski's also on this list. I used to like her. She plays a Native person. Of course, it's not Native. James Woods.
You don't even have to.
I'm going to because women who are victims get shut down all the time. And
right. There's just so many examples with James Woods over the last 3 years or so that it's just like, oh my fucking God.
Well, there's one that...
Yeah, I know. Go ahead.
Amber Tamlin was involved with a TV show, and I'll post the article in a minute. And James happened to I'm getting my. Actually, I think I'm getting my.
Yeah, James Woods had actually posted a tweet about who was it? I'm trying to find it real quick.
Person in it was a person on the show or involved with the show put a hand up her skirt.
Armie Hammer. What happened is he had posted about Armie Hammer before Amber Tamlin got involved, in which he was doing a movie in which a 24-year-old and a 17-year-old have a sexual relationship. James Woods posted something about how disgusting that was, and then Amber Tamlin called him out and said, as disgusting as it was when you hit on, tried to get me to come home with you when I was 16. And he was 60 or 59.
16 years old. And this is a guy who I enjoyed throughout the years. James, even in a movie that didn't make as much money as it was supposed to, Contact with Jodie Foster. The guy, I even liked his cameo on The Simpsons. The guy's very talented. But even, like you said, there's a lot of examples of James Woods. He's also a racist Republican. Then I get all Republican.
Oh, yeah.
But, yeah, so he's a lot of just disgusting rhetoric. And it sucks because it's like the reason why we have this show. It's so if you are aware of your surroundings in the United States, especially if you're a person of color or a marginalized person, trans, gay, disabled, etc., it's so hard to enjoy anything because there's so much bigotry involved with things that entertainment that we want to watch. But then you add in the fact that all these celebrities that you grew up loving, or even you become an adult and like, they're a-holes. And talking about white people, most of them are racist. It's a shame.
I mean, I remember when Mel Gibson, of course, the whole issue with him and his rant came out. Before that, I mean, I grew up on Mel Gibson movies. Come on, Lethal Weapon. Tom Cruise, similarly, just a fucking complete asshole. And it's like, I can't even...
Tom's a weird one because that whole the church he's with is such a bizarre situation.
Right, but the sexism, even if it is quote unquote the fault of the church, which it's not, we know how that.
Well, it's also the homophobia.
Absolutely.
Laura Prepon of that '70s shows fame, and of course Orange Is the New Black. A reporter was doing an interview with her and asked her, "Well, what do you think of all this homophobia? In the Church of Scientology?" And she goes, "I don't know what you're talking about."
Oh yeah, because she's a Scientologist,
and it's in the freaking. It's in. I think it's in Dianetics.
Yeah,
it's in Dianetics, which is the Bible for Scientologists. So she's just flat out lying. So I mean,
wasn't there? There's like 3 actors from that '70s show that just ruined it for me. I was like, man.
I think Masterson, who played
Masterson,
and
no, it is just 2. Laura
who's also Scientology?
No, I think it's just Prepon and Masterson. Now that I think about it.
Well, his name I always hated his name because it sounded like his name was Danny Masturbation, so it always made me feel a little weird. I had to take a shower every time I saw the credits of that '70s show when I was watching it as a teenager. But also, he's a Scientologist.
I have to ask why Jamie Lee Curtis is on this list, just out of curiosity.
Well, I
like this list. I'm learning stuff.
It's funny because most people hate it, but then a lot the people who understand it, they love it. Right. Jamie Lee Curtis, don't you know, believes that all lives matter.
Oh no, didn't know. Damn it.
Yeah. That's
all you got to say.
Name a couple that if you don't know anymore, because you've lived a little longer than I have seen pop culture even better than I do.
Oh no, I can generally find plenty of things. As I said, just leave Keanu out, and I'm okay.
Keanu,
and I can, and as I said, I can ruin that myself. It's one of those system of disbelief.
Is there anybody from the list that you were unaware?
Oh yeah, I was unaware of Jamie Lee Curtis. I didn't know that. A I'm unaware of some of them, but like it doesn't surprise me. Does that make sense?
Well,
like I see Kristen Wiig. I don't know what it is, but yeah, okay. And I mean Chuck Woolery. I could give you 500 reasons there. I'm probably not the same.
I loved I don't know if anybody remembers the game show, but it was called Greed. I happen to love that show, and I thought he did a great job on that show. Of course, now we know he's a racist a-hole. I'm trying to find the picture. You say Christian Wiig. Here it is. Nobody on the show seemed to be displeased with this. There was, I don't know what it was from exactly in terms of a skit, because I have not watched SNL in years for a number of reasons. But there is a picture of, I think it's some white woman. All white women look the same. Maybe Ely Kemper, I don't know. Of a native, a woman in braids with a feather. Some SNL dude has long hair with a feather. And then there's a pilgrim in the back. And Wig is just standing there like, it's all good with me. I don't see a problem here. Where's my check for guest hosting?
Right.
Who cares?
Oh, yeah. I can see that. Let's see who else. I don't even know who Beth Mowins is.
This one sucks. They all suck, but this one really sucks. Beth Mowins is a brilliant announcer of football games for ESPN. And for the first time in the history of Monday Night Football, which is a staple of Americana, a staple of the NFL, she was the first person to ever do a Monday Night Football game who was a woman. And I watched the game. Like, she's doing a great job as usual. Of course, there was a bunch of sexist comments on Twitter saying she's horrible just because she's a woman. I don't watch football to hear a woman talk. That's why I get away from them. That's why I watch football, to get away from them. But she was announcing the game, and then they come back from a commercial break, and there is a 30 for 30 documentary, ESPN documentary, about one of the seasons of the Washington football team. Beth decided to go the Washington Red slurs. She used the slur on national television. So while a woman was doing something amazing and heroic, she's also being racist.
That one's a rough one in the sense that, I believe I completely understand it. But if it was part of her job, but still you can not do that, but then you could not be on air.
I shouldn't say plenty, but there are a number of announcers, analysts.
Are there? See, I don't know very much about football, so I don't know how it's discussed otherwise.
I'll tell you this. When I used to work in sports media, and I even had my own radio podcast show of my own, I stopped using it. I just stopped using the word. I even did a rant on my show explaining why I'm never using the word again. And that's the decision. Just don't say the word. Just don't say it. It's that simple. But she couldn't help herself. And it's a shame, but that's how celebrities are and how white America is. It sucks. But, I can't even watch late night talk shows anymore. Because you cannot have, and there's the GIF that is still on Twitter. I've posted it a couple times of Jimmy Fallon and Donald Trump before the election.
Yep.
And Jimmy's like, "Can you touch your hair? Can I touch your hair?"
Humanizing him, making it normal.
I'm like, are you kidding? Are you kidding? And of course, Jimmy Fallon and Jimmy Kimmel, the two Jimmys, have done blackface before.
It doesn't surprise me.
So did Angelina Jolie, which is why she's also on my list.
Which one?
The movie Jolie did, I'm trying to remember what it was.
Marianne Pearl?
She played I'm looking it up right now.
Mary Ann Pearl is probably the one you're going
That is it, because she was like a journalist. I can't remember.
Well, she's the wife of
A Mighty Heart, I think.
I didn't even that.
Marin Pearl. That's the person's name, but that's the movie. What it's called, A Mighty Heart. At Marin Pearl's memoir, A Mighty Heart. And of course, there's the stuff with her just collecting.
Right, I remember that. Yeah,
shapes of color. Like she has some weird fetish for were collector's items. Like what? There are white children you can adopt, Angelina.
Yeah, I don't know. I've always encouraged adopting anybody.
Well, it just seems like they're all. It's just, and I've read an article about how she does it, and it's just not. It's dirty, but it's just. Even before I read that, I was weirded out. Why are you only adopting babies of color? And then, of course, you do blackface. It just puts a whole bunch of questions up.
Right.
It's a dirty world we live in, and Hollywood is as dirty as it gets. Even the Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, and Bowie. Child rape all over the place right there.
Okay, I'm being told to ask about John Oliver now.
You
top.
I could be nice and just let it fest. You could also just search my Twitter. But okay, the reason for John Oliver, and some people would disagree with this, but I will not apologize at all for saying this.
I would never ask you to apologize for anything, even if I disagree.
There you go. During the resurgence of the movement, John did it took him a while, but he did a segment about Ferguson. And I was like, wow. All right. I think maybe we can trust John. Maybe he's an ally. And also, it was damn good reporting. And then another show goes by, and he fails to talk about the black and native lives of color being, killed every day. And then another show goes by. And then another show goes by. And another show goes by. And I started to notice a pattern with John, because I remember watching his stand-up before he got really famous, and which is darn good stand-up. He is so talented. But what I noticed is he is a hardcore pro-American. He's shed his. I'm a nice little Englishman. I'm a little cheap, cuddly Englishman. But then America. I'm adopting it as my own country. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And as much shit as he talks about America, he'll seem to be all googly-eyed about it and fail and fail and fail. So I just stopped watching the show. Talk about native genocide at all. Because if you have a platform like that, and he talked about, I don't know if it was the R word. I think it was Columbus.
Yeah.
That was it.
He talks about both of them.
Yeah, we were both. Okay. There was one more than Jon Stewart, if I remember correctly, because John talked about the R word and the team. But John did talk about Columbus Day. And of course, that's obviously a while back, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and obviously there should be no Columbus Day. But then what about Sarah Lee Circlebearer or Mavis Goodblanket or Savannah Goodwin? What about all these people? Savannah Graywin. See, that's what this is exactly why. It proves my point.
I didn't know any of those names, so I wouldn't understand. I wouldn't necessarily blame somebody who was unaware.
Yeah, these are all names of Native people who were killed or died because of racism or the cops.
Yeah.
And if you're going to have a show that talks about racism and inequality and the underbelly of Americana, but you're going to leave out the original people of this land, and of course black people too. The Ferguson thing was that was like a nice little gift he gave us, I guess. You know.
Oh, he's done a lot of them on there, at least that I've seen, because I use them in my classroom.
Oh, so maybe he's after I stopped watching.
Especially, he has a lot more pull right now than ever because he actually won an Emmy, and so now he's kind of walking that's one of the things with any of them, especially, you know, what are they allowed to say? And so I think that, especially after the corporate consolidation one last week, I think that we're going to see either A, he's going to not have a job much longer, or B, he's going to start walking a thinner line.
Well, see, you bring up a good point, because he has done so many different segments about things that this country, the powers that be with this country, just got so pissed off at. So upset. How dare you talk about that? Do you know who we are? We can crush you like a bug. But for some reason, to actually show white supremacy for what it is and American racism for what it is, he doesn't want to do it.
I also see it as well, and I'm not giving him any excuses because I don't know his excuses. I know a lot of times you have this is where you're going to find dueling discussions within the activist community, whether it's Black Lives Matter, Ferguson, St. Louis, or anywhere, whether or not it is his place, because it's his place to talk to other white people, but how to discuss it, you know, the Native issues and Black issues, having a white man discuss it or having a white woman discuss it is very controversial. And I know that, being a white woman that teaches race and ethnicity, how controversial it is every time I do it for the first week or so. And then it's, okay, you know, I see where this could be seen in multiple ways within just the activist community themselves. Like, it is or it isn't his place. And it should be, as you know, he should talk about, I don't talk about all of it, but that would be my opinion. Whereas I know plenty of Black activists who would say it's not his. It's one thing to talk about white supremacy and to discuss the issue, but then to actually go into like struggles, or you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, you still have the option to bring somebody in, which he's done
Absolutely.
More than once or
Yes.
twice or 5 times. It's just the point of him not wanting to do it. He'll talk about civil forfeitures, but then fail to mention that it hits people of color the hardest.
Yeah. I think I had one recently, like, I am a big fan of Joe Madison. I don't know if you know who Joe Madison is, but he's a radio talk show host and an activist. He marched with Martin Luther King. He's very, very activist-minded, and he's on Sirius XM in the mornings on the Urban View channel. And I always listen to him, and he's always talking, you know, he's very, all of this stuff, whether it's the media, and he's, of course, on Trump this, Trump that, but everything else. And last week, he had said, he talked about St. Louis and the protests, and it was the Monday after all of the arrest. I guess it was 2 weeks ago now. Well, because all the arrests happened again last night, but that's another show. But
that's our show on Friday.
Yes. But it's the point of the pop culture. I mean, he is part of at least the radio pop culture, and that he kind of blamed protesters for, I don't even remember what it was, because I just got so fucking mad. Because, of course, all he's taking is what he's getting from the news, right? And he spends all his time talking about, you need to come here to get your news. You need to come here to get educated. And I had, like, tweeted and sent him DMs and shit from the night before, showing the videos before he even talked about it the next morning, because it would be something that he would normally talk about. And, not granted, I don't expect people to pay attention to my tweets, but still, it was there. He had it available to him somewhere. And yet still went with the, you know, outside agitators, protesters, or just, of course it was pro-protester, but then it was, you know, with the arrest, well, those were just outsiders. Those weren't real protesters. The real protesters are peaceful type idea that you hear all the time. And that pissed me off, and I haven't listened to him since, which is rough because I listen to him every morning.
Well, I watch John Oliver every week. I loved last week tonight. I adored it. I wanted more of it. I was mad that it was only like a 25-minute episode, and there was only a limited number of episodes per season. But this is what it is. It's bigotry is so ingrained into Americana, it leaks over and is also a major foundation of Hollywood. and we are at the end of the show. I will admit this has been one of our, at least in my mind, one of our more fun shows. And I want to thank again Tananarive Due for coming on and doing an amazing job talking about the lack of color in Hollywood and how Black folks and people of color and marginalized people can continue to push forward as we have for so many years in Hollywood to give ourselves a voice and make that voice bigger. And we won't be here for a couple weeks. Gal is going on vacation, and I am taking the opportunity to rest since she is taking a vacation.
Woohoo, vacation! There's never resting on vacation, though.
Oh, that's true. I'll be
Resting.
napping, actually, resting. You'll be, I don't know where you're going, but
Canada. Woo.
That's a normal vacation. I mean, there's a lot of maple syrup up there.
There is. That's not a stereotype. I've been there.
Well, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, as my father would always say to me, I hope you enjoyed episode 3 of Who's Culture. We will be back in 3 weeks for episode 4. And
in 3 weeks we'll have plenty to talk about. You know how much stuff to watch by then?
Oh my gosh. Yes, especially since you'll be on vacation.
Right.
There'll be plenty of things you'll have seen and be almost breaking.
We can talk about the in-plane movies.
Oh, of course. So we'll be back in a few weeks, and our episodes are archived on People's Radio United, so you can listen to them. And
we have a Facebook page now too.
Yes, we're getting digital, y'all.
We're digitizing.
That's going to be my album if I ever mistakenly come out with one. Digital, y'all.
Oh God.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.